All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode like today's episode with Derrik Klassen. Derrik, how are you?
Doing fantastic. It's good to be back. I'm very excited for this.
Good. It's always glad to have you. It's funny, George. I was thinking this is way off topic, and I'll get back to what I want to start with. But as I was watching the intro with Jim Nagy, it just reminds me how much football has changed.
Absolutely.
Generally, particularly in college football, where you now need to have a general manager of your program to kind of sort all these things out. Just really way off topic, but just really wild when I see Nagy and think of like where the game has gone to in college football.
No, I think that's great to bring up. Like nobody, I don't know. He held the job for what, like 6-7 years for a while, because obviously he had taken over for Phil Savage, and he took a job that literally didn't exist 2 years ago. Like you said, it's crazy how we've changed.
And it's just getting started. I mean, who knows where that thing's headed. What I had planned on starting with, Derrik, was asking you a little bit about the last 24 months for you. I mean, it's been a pretty wild ride as wild rides go. I mean, you were killing the game, and then Matthew Harmon came calling and weren't really there very long before Robert May said, you know what, I think I'd like some of that action. And now you want half of the Athletic Football Show. What have you learned over the last couple 24 months?
What have I learned? That's a great question. I would say, so a lot of the work I had done before taking the athletic job this year was mostly writing. And I had done podcasts before. Obviously, I've been on with you guys, and I've been on a bunch of other shows, but it was never really something I had done regularly, weekly. Like that was the core part of my job. So I think learning the cadence and like what particular work and how much time I have for film. I actually had more time for film this year, which was nice because I didn't have to spend as much time writing. So I think that was fun. I think what I learned was that specifically the Sunday live shows are very hard.
Absolutely. Very reactionary,
really
right?
Difficult.
Yeah.
Yes. Like it's just, you spend 12 hours trying to get as much eyeballs on every single game as you can. And some of it's red zone. Some of it's you're watching full games. Some of it's you're watching the 30-minute cut up that they post from the 10 a.m. games. Like it's so much. And then after all of that, you have to go live for an hour and a half and like try to remember all of those things at once. So that took me probably about 8 weeks for me to find any sort of footing with that. And so that was definitely the biggest learning curve.
Now, George and I have been doing this podcast together in some semblance for 3-4 years now. How long did it take for you and Robert to kind of get that? You know what I mean? You don't even have to give a look anymore. You can either hear it or feel where you're getting ready to go to next. It takes a lot of work, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. How did it happen for you guys?
No, that's such a good point to bring up, because I mean, me and Robert would have calls, early in the season trying to work through some of that stuff. Like, when is a good time for me to be contentious, or when do you want to jump into me when I'm talking, or vice versa, and all that other stuff. And what were just the particular framings of like certain arguments we wanted to take. And so it took probably until almost the playoffs to feel like 100% comfortable, where we really felt like we had it nailed down. So going into the playoffs, I thought we felt good, Super Bowl and all that stuff. And then now that I think we've hit the offseason cadence where these shows are a little bit more loose, a little bit more fun, I think it's allowed us to even like push that a little bit further. So yeah, like I said, almost took like a full season. For me, it was in a lot of ways like a rookie season. So to get through it by the end, like exactly, I had to get the reps in, but we feel pretty good now.
Absolutely. So, Derrik, obviously we're a Commander show. I'm kind of curious. I know one of your specialties is analyzing their progression. Jaden Daniels definitely changed the whole perspective here in DC. We're so excited. We're having a great quarterback where we see an upward trajectory with him. I'm curious, was his rookie year a surprise to you? Like, I forget now. Was he someone that you anticipated hitting the ground running here in DC?
I think it was a surprise to me. I didn't think he was going to be a bad prospect by any means, but in my mind, he was going to be kind of like the best versions of like Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo, where he's really good at protecting the ball. He's obviously a huge value as a runner. He can throw down the field really well. But I just worried about some of his pocket presence, somehow how much he was going to take sacks, somehow how well he was. Was he going to be willing to throw the middle of the field the way that you need to in the NFL? Those are some of the questions I had coming out. I think early in the season, some of that stuff was still there. It's just he was so good at what he was good at, it didn't matter. But I think what was most impressive to me is that by the end of the season, he did get a little bit more comfortable staying in the pocket and navigating. He did get a little bit more comfortable throwing over the middle of the field, hitting a backside dig route or throwing a seam ball, whatever it was. And I think he did a really good job of being aggressive when he needed to, but never really putting the ball at risk. And so I think what I got wrong about him the most was I didn't appreciate how valuable it would be to have a guy who never throws the ball to the other team and is a top 5 scrambler at the position. Like, because of those two things, the Commanders were able to just hold on to the ball for a lot longer than other teams because he would either bail them out of third down and then he was never giving it to the other team. So I think I just underrated that part about him a little bit.
It's funny. He came in with that VR system and they really cranked that thing up. And I noticed that the Seahawks now have Milroe using it also. I'm surprised that that's just not a given in the league. Like, rookie quarterback, here's your clipboard, here's your VR code, system, because you can just tell that not only did Jaden understand how much of a difference it made, but like the coaching staff really did.
I think it's a fascinating development. And I think, it was like 8 years ago or so where they were really starting to try to toy with this stuff, but I don't think it was really fully fleshed out yet. But I think Daniels has really been one of the first guys where, people always talk about in practice, it's like, oh, if you're not the guy throwing, try to get your mental reps. Well, you're not like really seeing it the way that you would be seeing it if you were actually playing quarterback. But with the VR stuff, you actually get to do some of that. And so there obviously is still a disconnect from going out there and a 350 pounder flying at you and actually still making the throws. But there is something to, and I think you see this with Daniels, he is really good at identifying blitzes pre-snap and he knows how to replace them. And I think that type of stuff is the value he gets from VR, is like, you can just load, some sort of simulation of like, okay, who is, we're playing X team this week. Here's this front that they play all the time. And this is what they blitz out of it. Okay, well, if you get 100 reps of that in the VR system over the week, it's like, okay, well, when I see it on Sunday, I'll probably be ready for it, whatever their little adjustments are off of it.
Well, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we all grew up on video games.
Exactly.
And it's the way we see, the game. I mean, think about all the coaches that grew up on Madden. We hear McVay talk about it all the time. And so it feels like a natural progression in the way things are done. Cliff took a lot of, I think, George, it's fair to say Cliff took a lot of flack before the season started last year.
Absolutely.
And you could tell early on that some of the other, him having experienced what he did in the league, and then the addition of like the Anthony Lynn's of the world, the Brian Johnsons of the world, really kind of made an impact on how they did the play calling. Obviously, the quarterback helps. They bring in Tunsil. They draft a tackle high. They bring in Deebo. It feels like this is another year, and maybe just this is the way the league's moving. They've decided we just are going to put up 30 a week, and if the defense can get us a turnover too, that's how we want to play ball this year. Be a little bit more explosive, so we don't have to count on those 12 play drives like you talked about. How have you felt about the offense for the offseason, and what do you expect Cliff can do in year two? I've said several times in the last couple of weeks, I wonder how much of the Cliff playbook got scrapped last year simply because the offensive line wasn't good enough to give Daniels enough time to get it down the field.
That's the part I'm most interested in, because when they hired Cliff Kingsbury, I was not that excited about it. One, because of what he did in college, I think was not that good. And obviously some of his Arizona, you had some decent stuff in Arizona, but a lot of that was led by Kyler and DeAndre Hopkins just playing out of their minds. Like, it wasn't really that much Cliff stuff. But he gets to Washington, and I thought what was most impressive about what he did was how he hid the offensive line, the way that he was able to keep backs in protections or tight ends, or he would like full slide, into the best, pass rusher that he was facing. He just did such a good job of almost like a pitcher who knows how to mix up, the pitches that he's throwing at a guy. Cliff did that really well with his protections. What makes the Tunsil pick and the Connerly pick interesting is that if both of those guys end up playing, and obviously give them better play than they were getting at the position last year. They just might not need to do as much of that stuff. So that to me that makes me wonder, like, okay, well, how much more creativity is Cliff going to have to spend during each week to be able to push some more stuff into, like, okay, how do we unlock the run game a little bit more? Because that was an issue with Washington last year. Outside of, obviously, Daniels was great, but their hand the ball off to the running back run game was not very good. And then I think even in the passing game, they did some really good stuff. But if Cliff has a couple more hours a week to spend on that instead of what the hell he has to do in protection, I do feel like there's maybe another level that we could see here that I'm kind of excited about.
Derek, are you a Deebo Samuel fan? Because I think that's definitely he's a provocative player. Right? People like him. People think that he had that 1 year wonder when everyone went down the running back room. I see the potential. I see the fit in Cliff Kingsbury, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think he's a nice player, and I think he's a good player for what they want. Because obviously Terry McLaurin is your just go win on one-on-one and give us something. Whereas I think Cliff is always going to be a guy who wants to have screens and RPOs and some of the silly jet type stuff in the offense. That's what he wanted. And I think they didn't have a great guy for that last year. And I do think Deebo Samuel is really good for that. My issues with it, or at least some of my concerns with it, were he's getting a little bit older and he's just hurt all of the time. And so for as many games as Deebo is on the field, I like this. I'm just wondering, like, are they going to get him for 14 and in the playoffs, or are they going to get him for 8 and not in the playoffs? And that to me is really the bigger question, as opposed to what is he going to give you when he's healthy?
And George, that's an interesting point for the organization of all the many things that have changed in Washington and the upgrades they've done and the upgrades to the facilities. The training staff deserves a lot of credit because for the most part, other than Lattimore and Noah Brown, which was like a liver ulceration. I mean, I don't know how you do for that one.
Yeah.
They were really healthy. I mean, when's the last time Ertz played a full slate? So I think they deserve a lot of credit in the way they do that. I don't have the insights into what they're doing, but it's obviously work because that's a whole new group that they brought in there. Derek, we're always looking up. We're not on top of the mountain yet, so we're always looking at the king on top of the mountain. It's the Eagles. I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to hear people hear me say that. To me, they have the best roster in the league last year. There's no reason they don't have the best roster in the league this year. Did Washington close the gap at all?
That's a really loaded question. So I think the offense. So here's my like kind of full scope outlook with Washington. I think the offense should be a little bit better. I mean, they were, I think, 6th or 7th in points per game last year, and I would not be shocked if they go higher than that, especially if Deebo plays more games than not. Like, I really do think that they have that potential. I expect Jaden Daniels to continue to improve because he's done it for 5 years now. If you go back and watch what he was doing in college, so all of that stuff.
That's a great point.
I expect some progression from that side. I think with the defense, I'm a little bit less optimistic. And so kind of like you were mentioning earlier, I think they're going to be in a lot of games where they're trying to win 35-32. And that's a lot of how the Bengals have lived the past couple of years. And obviously last year for the Bengals was worst case scenario where they were truly one of the worst defenses in the league. And that changes the math a little bit. But I do worry a little bit that Washington is trying to play that style. But again, if their defense can be 18th instead of 29th the way that the Bengals can, it would be fine. It's just for me, when I imagine did Washington close the gap, to me it would have been more they needed to see improvements on defense to really do that, and I just didn't see a whole lot of that this offseason.
Derek, we're in the time of the offseason where you're seeing positional rankings and everyone's going to go through the roster step by step. I'm curious what your thoughts are in regard to Jaden Daniels and what tier he kind of falls underneath. Do you put him in that top 5, top 10 class across the league? And in what areas of improvement do you still want to see from him moving forward?
He's probably, to me, in like the back half of the top 10.
Okay.
Because to me, there's obviously like there's a Mount Rushmore, right? With Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Those guys I think are pretty untouchable. To me, there's another tier where you have like the Justin Herberts. I think for as long as Stafford can play, I think he's kind of in that tier. I'm scared to say this on the show, but I love Dak Prescott, so I think he is still in that tier. And then I think that's where you start where Jaden Daniels is in that class, though, with the guys like Prescott. I would also throw, I still think CJ Stroud is in that tier. But you kind of have that grouping of 5 or 6 other guys who make up that back half of the top 10. I think that's where he is. To crack anywhere close to that top 4, I would still want to see him getting a little bit better at not taking those sacks, because even though I think he did get better at it over the course of the season, it was still kind of one of the weaker parts of his game. And I don't think he's quite the pocket manager that you see from Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or quite any of those guys. So I think improving there would be nice. And then for as improved as I thought he was as throwing over the middle of the field and stuff, there's a stylistic thing where I just love the guys who do it a ton, which is actually why I had reservations for Joe Burrow for a while, is that he doesn't do it a lot. So if he could like uptick that 5% more, where he was just a little bit more willing to make those throws. So, but even all of that being said, this is stuff that he already improved on, right? So I wouldn't be shocked if he does it again, because it's just what he's done the past few years. So that's kind of what I want to see. But yeah, if I had to rank him now, probably like 8th, 7th in the league, and totally room for improvement.
I appreciate your Dak Prescott comment. It's another one where it's like, you hate to give props in the division or whatever, but when he's outside of the playoffs, when he's healthy and playing football, they're winning football games. It's just how it is. Is the NFC East the toughest division in football this year?
The only reason I would say no is I think there's one clearly bad team in the Giants. And there's
that roster's not terrible outside of quarterback. I mean, if Andrew Thomas comes back healthy,
that's true,
and they get anything out of Neal at guard, that defensive line is going to be sick. They got decent corners.
I do think that they should be better than last year. The quarterback situation is just so scary for me, though. And I think outside of Thomas, I'm probably lower on the offensive line than I think a lot of other people. And so that scares me. I would say the NFC East is probably like the 2nd or 3rd toughest division, though, because to me, I think the NFC North is a bloodbath, and I think the NFC West is a bloodbath. Those two, the NFC in general is actually pretty close, but I would say those are probably where. Do
we not give enough credence to? Are we not concerned enough about the fact that the Lions just lost both coordinators, and nobody seems to really talk about it?
So I do think it is concerning, especially like Ben Johnson was always going to be really hard to replace, and Aaron Glenn was obviously there. And the thing with defensive coordinators, it's not just that Glenn was good, it's that I think reinserting a new defensive coordinator actually tends to take more time for that unit to be good. Like sometimes we'll see with offensive guys, you bring in a new guy and he's immediately good right away. Like we saw that with Liam Cohen last year in Tampa Bay. He was replacing Canales, and Canales was solid. You bring in Liam Cohen, he's immediately way better. Defense, that usually doesn't happen as much, so I'm a little bit worried there, but I might just be so bought in on Dan Campbell really being the engine to all of this that I kind of just trust his judgment on the guys that he's hiring. So I don't think they'll be, they won 14 games last year. I don't know if they'll do that again, but I do still expect double digits from them.
And if that's the bloodbath, what's number 2? You said you thought maybe the NFC East was number 3. So if the NFC North is number 1, who is number 2?
I think the NFC West is pretty
oh wow,
tough.
really?
I think all of those. I think even with the Niners, like a lot of their, I think the defense might not be good, but I do think the offense is going to be significantly better and healthier than it was last year. And so I also just have like a pretty big amount of baked in faith in Kyle Shanahan, and guys like him and Sean McVay almost never have 2 bad seasons in a row. So I expect all of those teams to play fairly well.
Are you a Kyler Murray guy? I'm sorry, George. Sorry. While we're out there in the West,
I like Kyler Murray, but he's, to go back to like the ranking quarterbacks thing, he's probably like quarterback 12-ish to me, where I just think he's really good. His best games are great. He has very good stretches. There is just a part of me that it's a little bit infuriating that we've never seen him play well into December. And that was even an issue last year, where they were a really exciting offense for the first 10 weeks of the season, and not entirely because of his fault, but they started to fall off the rails a little bit towards the end. And it's just like, I would firmly put him top 10 if he could just have one really good season into December, but he just hasn't done it yet.
If you can compile all his falls and kind of extrapolate that over a whole season, it'd be fantastic.
Awesome.
Everything 100%. All right, so going along with that, so going back to NFC North, I find it very fascinating. I think them and the NFC East are the 2 best divisions. The NFC North is so intriguing. They have young guns out there. They have Jordan Love, JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, even Jared Goff. He had a renaissance year the past couple of years out there. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts? How would you? I mean, you don't have to necessarily rank them. But I'm curious what is the trajectory, hierarchy out there, and what are your thoughts on JJ McCarthy coming out and Caleb Williams year 2?
The Vikings are so hard to talk about because if I was just ranking rosters like quarterback agnostic, they would be top 5 for me. But it's just I didn't love JJ McCarthy coming out of college, and now he's coming off of a knee injury, and so I just think that there's a lot of concerns there. But it's also this situation might be quarterback proof, so it's so hard for me to gauge what exactly right. Like it's just so good, and it got better, right? Because they just signed Ryan Kelly, they signed Will Fries, they drafted another guard, like. That team could be awesome just depending on what the quarterback gives them. If I had to rank the teams, I really have a lot of faith in the Packers. I think they're going to be good. So I would probably say that they're going to win the division. And then I would put probably the Lions next, even though they might fall off a little bit. Then the Vikings, just because of the whole JJ McCarthy question. And then even though I think the Bears will be greatly improved, they're the Bears. They've never had a good offense. You have to prove to me that you can actually field a good offense before I fully believe it.
Let me follow up with that. So, like with Caleb Williams, I think he's a very interesting case study. We saw that. I'm sure you saw the clips where he doesn't know how to study film. He wasn't necessarily a coach's first year. I'm curious, were you a Caleb Williams fan going into the draft last year? Like, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. I think you were a Drake May guy, if I remember correctly. I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on Caleb Williams and the whole quarterback class in general, Drake May too.
I'm still pretty high on Caleb Williams. I still think he's going to be good. So obviously when I came out of the draft, for me, it was Drake May, Caleb Williams, and then Jaden Daniels. And so I think especially. Sorry,
why is that Drake May so much? I'm curious, but just the prototype size and the arm strength, and what was it?
I just think arm talent wise, he is the best of the bunch. I think athletic wise, obviously Jaden Daniels is faster and quicker, but like when you combine the size that Drake May brings, I think he's like pretty close to an equivalent athlete, especially down near the red zone. And then I just thought Drake played with. I love quarterbacks that are willing to be a little bit more aggressive and push the envelope. To go back to Dak Prescott, it's probably why I like him a little bit more than I should. And I think Drake May just had that mentality to him where he was very willing to push the envelope, make these aggressive intermediate throws. And I think we actually saw last year why I was so impressed with him as a rookie is I thought at North Carolina, Drake May did a lot of, okay, we're down 10 points. I have to go do something insane to win the game. And you saw some of that with the Patriots, but I thought we would get like 30% more of the boneheaded plays than we actually got. And he actually played more calculated than I was anticipating. So he came into the league very clearly prepared, and it was really impressive to me.
Gotcha.
Before we get out of the NFC North, who actually has the best roster in that group? Because I was thinking like that Bears roster is actually kind of loaded when you look at it. Like they went and improved the offensive line. I love the tackles they've taken in back-to-back years. I mean, they've got more wide receivers when they know what to do with this at this point. DeAndre Swift's not terrible. He's just the guy that never actually did it, but who knows what he'll be in the system, I guess. And the defense isn't terrible. So it's like, obviously the quarterback was never going to make it happen with Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. I mean, when we get down to it, this is the reason he didn't want to go there. Nobody on the planet wanted to go play for Shane Waldron. That was never going to work. So it's like, how big can the jump be when you're going from Shane Waldron calling the plays to Ben Johnson calling the plays? I find it very fascinating.
I mean, if Ben Johnson is who we believe that he is, and also if those interior players can stay healthy, like obviously Dahlman was hurt last year. Jonah Jackson has not been healthy for a long time, really, basically his entire career. But if those guys can stay healthy and Johnson is who we think he is, I am pretty bullish that they can be, I don't know about like a top 8 offense. That's probably pretty rich, but I think they can be like a pretty solidly above average offense, because I think what was interesting about Caleb Williams last year and what makes the, nobody taught me how to watch film thing pretty interesting is when you watched Caleb Williams play, I think we all thought he was going to come out of college being just the runaround guy, doing all this crazy stuff outside of the pocket. And I think why he actually struggled was he tried to go too far the other way, where he really wanted to be anchored to the pocket. He really wanted to go 1 to 2 to 3 in my progressions and play big boy quarterback. And there's a part of me that respects that. And there's another part of me that was like, okay, well, if nobody was actually teaching you how to play that way, it was never going to work the way that you wanted it to. And so I do think I actually have a good amount of faith that Ben Johnson is going to teach him a little bit more correctly, put together the offense in a way that is pretty conducive to him having success. So I still want to see him play more free, but if they have the 11th best offense next year and Caleb starts to look like a franchise quarterback, I'm not going to be shocked at all.
Yeah, because the numbers for Caleb in the second half of last year, when Thomas Davis took over, start heading in the right direction, right? They looked more like what you'd expect. Talk about blundering something. The way the Bears did that was just unbelievable. I'm curious, Derek, as you guys keep an eye on all of the league with the Athletic Football Show, is there a team in particular that you think of the offseason and say, okay, they really are trying to make it happen?
In terms of teams that are
Or
really trying to
surprised you, maybe.
In terms of teams that were really trying to make it happen, I was pretty fascinated by all of what the Broncos did.
Yeah.
I really like a lot of what they've done, and some of it's risky, right? Like Dre Greenlaw is coming off of some pretty significant injuries. Talanoa Hufanga is a car crash dummy. He's probably going to miss 5 games a year no matter what. And so they've made some pretty risky bets. But I just love what they're trying to accomplish on defense, where they're trying to build the spine where a couple of years ago they had signed like guys like DJ Jones and Zach Allen to be their interior players. Now you're getting in a super physical and violent linebacker in Dre Greenlaw. Same thing with Talanoa Hufanga. You're really making this violent, sturdy spine of the defense that I love. Like that's the style of defense I like. And then, they also have the best cornerback in the league who just won Defensive Player of the Year. Like I think they have like really something cool with what they put together on defense. And then the offense, I think Nix is a step down from the other 3 rookie quarterbacks that we just talked about in terms of potential and all that stuff. But I do think that Sean Payton clearly has a vision for what he wants Nix to be as a distributor, as a ball handler, and even as a runner. And so I trust Sean Payton's vision for the offense. And I think like them signing Ingram and drafting guys like RJ Harvey this year, where, the Broncos last year did a good job of staying on the field, and Cortland Sutton can give us, some jump ball stuff, but they just didn't have fast players. And so now Ingram and Harvey does give them that. So I just thought they did a good job of understanding what their team was lacking this offseason and just full send attacking that in the offseason.
Are you a Sean Payton guy?
I am. I love Sean Payton. Yeah, I think he puts together some really, really impressive offenses. I was with the Russell Wilson offense, when I watched it, that first year, it was very obvious to me that the way that Sean Payton was calling the offense, that he just hated who the quarterback was. And so even if Bo Nix isn't like the best quarterback, it's very clearly a quarterback that Payton has a vision for. And that, to me, I think you can see why the offense took a step even with Nix.
We had Benjamin Albright on one time, and I asked him what happened with Wilson and why it just didn't work. And he said, Sean Payton wants you to yell at him as he's yelling at you, that he needs that, right? Like that's even down. You wouldn't think that with Drew Brees, but if Drew Brees didn't like what Sean Payton was saying, he had the right. They wanted him to be able to yell and say, hey, get out of my face. I don't like this. As you can imagine, Russell Wilson was not that guy, and Sean Payton hated him for it, which I thought was an interesting story from him. I got a couple more quarterback questions. What are they doing in Pittsburgh? What possibly can be the plan there? It can't. I mean, I guess it's got to be Aaron Rodgers now, because it can't be Mason Rudolph or whoever it is.
Cousins is still out there as well.
George, you're tapped into my brain. I think it should be Kirk Cousins. I hate the Aaron Rodgers thing. There's so much about it I don't like. Rodgers has always been so particular about the types of receivers he's working with. And if he were to go to Pittsburgh, it would be DK Metcalf, who is obviously a really talented player, but also notorious for kind of being in the wrong spot on routes, maybe not attacking the ball the way that you would want for a bigger guy. And I just feel like that's a weird mesh. And then none of the other guys on the roster, a lot of them are like experienced, or they're a little smaller. And all that seems like a weird fit for Rodgers. And then obviously with Arthur Smith still being there, it would be a super run heavy, probably want to throw the ball down the field offense. Rodgers doesn't really want to throw the ball down the field unless he's throwing a slot fade, which I don't know how much of that they're going to do. So I just don't love all of it. Whereas at least Kirk Cousins, the Arthur Smith offense, that whole structure is exactly what he's been doing for a decade. So I love that fit. So I think we're just going to get to a point in the offseason where at some point the Falcons will be willing to part with a few more millions and eat some more money to just be like, all right, we'll take a mid-round pick, whatever you can have him.
Derek, let's say in the AFC North, like the Cleveland Browns, obviously, like what the hell is even going on there? They have 5 different quarterbacks. We don't even know who's going to be rolling out there week 1. Do you have a preference? Do you see someone kind of rising to the top there? I think Joe Flacco is in theory getting the rep 1. Like, are you a Shador guy, Dylan Gabriel guy? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Flacco makes the most sense, right? Just
Yeah.
because has the most experience. He's been there before. And I do think stylistically he actually fits most with what Stefanski wants to do, which is gap running scheme, get under center, 7-step drop, throw a big post route, throw a big corner. So I do think Flacco fits that. I do think by week 7, one of these rookies is going to take over, and it's just a matter of, is it going to be Gabriel? Is it going to be Sanders? I didn't love Shedeur Sanders coming out of college. To me, I think there was a lot of I think in the best case scenario, Shedeur Sanders is like what Teddy Bridgewater was for the Vikings, which I think was like an above average quarterback. But also even that, I think Teddy was a better athlete. I think he was a little bit more accurate. And Teddy came out as one of the best processors I had ever seen. Like, he was a very bright quarterback. And I don't think Sanders is like an idiot or anything like that. It's just, it was a different level that we were working with. And I think it might take Sanders a few years to get there. So I think it's a funny situation. It's a funny quarterback room because it's less like who do you think will start at week 1, and then at the end it's more just who's going to start the most games. I would probably say Sanders, but we'll see how long we get Flacco.
And the interesting thing with them is, like, if you know anything about how the reps work for the quarterbacks, like quarterback 2 is not going to get any reps, right? Like much less quarterback 3. So how on earth is Gabriel or Sanders supposed to take the leap if they're not literally when they get no reps in practice?
That also makes me extra confused about why Kenny Pickett is still there. Like, when you have
I forgot
there.
Wow, okay.
When you have all these young guys and clearly you want one of them to take the leap this year and start for you, why would you waste any time with a guy like Kenny Pickett? And Kenny Pickett can be a fine backup in this league, but it's just not for the Cleveland Browns. Like, it should be somewhere else. So their whole situation is bizarre to me.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess we're kind of getting close to the end. It's got a couple more questions. There's a couple big free agent names that are out on the market right now. Jalen Ramsey's out there. Trey Henderson's potentially out there as well. Do you see either one of them moving? And if they were to go, do you see a potential fit that you want to see?
I think Hendrickson, for as messy as this is getting, at the end of the day, I think it's going to get done.
I agree with that.
This just happens with the Bengals a lot. And also, who are the good players on that defense if they don't have him? So I think they really, really need him to be there. So I think at some point that will get figured out. Ramsey, I think, is almost certainly not going to be a Dolphin. It's just a matter of where is he going to end up. I know a lot of people are connecting him to the Rams because obviously he's been there before. It seemed like that's where he was the most happiest during his career, truthfully, is when it's during his time with the Rams. I think the other LA team should be poking around. I really think that he should be a Los Angeles Charger because when I look at that team, I like some of the young corners they have. I think Cam Hart's a nice player. I think Tariq Still is a really nice player at the nickel. And I know they signed Dante Jackson to play cornerback too, but they just, to me, don't have a dynamic ball-getting corner. Jalen Ramsey can absolutely be that. And so I think if the Chargers want to go from being like this feisty 9-10 win team, Ramsey is the perfect move to make to where it's like, okay, if we want to be like a serious team this year, he's probably the best guy left on the market to do that.
Who's the better corner at this point, Lattimore or Ramsey?
So in terms of, it's an interesting question because the Washington with Dan Quinn wants to play a lot of man-to-man, and I do think Lattimore at his best is probably a little bit better and a little bit smoother at that. Ramsey, to me, at this stage in his career especially, is a little bit more of a zone guy. You can bump him into the nickel if you need to, and I think he's a much better tackler, and I think he's like a more physical presence. So I think the cop-out answer is it depends on what you need, but for the way that I would want to run a defense, it's probably Ramsey just because I love having a physical presence like that. But I think if Lattimore can stay healthy, he'll give the Commanders what they need.
And here's the last one. We were talking about quarterbacks and divisions, and the one we didn't talk about was the Giants, where they've got an interesting quarterback room up there. I mean, it sounds like everybody's playing for their life up there, coaching for their life. They keep telling us, no, that's not a thing. I mean, can Daboll get whatever is left out of Russell and go on a run? Or, I mean, this was always like with some of the stuff that they did here in Washington, where it's like you had to bet on the rookie at some point. A lot of the times they didn't do that, and then and then they're moving on from Gruden because he didn't do that. Like, at what point do you have to get Dart in there and get this thing moving? And what do you think about Dart? I actually like Dart. I think I had him 4th in the quarterbacks this year.
So there's one part of me with the Giants thing that
Actually,
it almost doesn't,
second.
It almost doesn't even matter what Daboll is going to do, because the Russell Wilson offense becomes the Russell Wilson offense, which is going to be, we're going to throw deep outside the numbers. And I think in Pittsburgh last year, out because of how volatile George Pickens was, that kind of went up and down. I do think, though, Malik Neighbors is way better than George Pickens, and so that could really help. And then also, I think Darius Slayton, like, some of his best work is purely down the field. And so
I like Theo Johnson at tight end.
I agree. I thought he actually had a quietly pretty solid rookie season. So they've got some decent weapons there. To me, it again just boils down to how good can the offensive line be. And I think outside of Thomas, I have a lot of questions. And if the offensive line is going to be bad, 30-some-odd-year-old Russell Wilson is going to take a lot of sacks. And so I think that that could be the issue for them there. Where I do think that makes Dart kind of an interesting proposition, where I think a lot of Daboll's best work over the years, whether it was in college with Jalen Hurts at Alabama, or obviously with Josh Allen, or even a couple years ago with Daniel Jones in New York, it's when the quarterback could move and be a part of the run game and be part of the boot game and stuff like that. And I do think Dart gives them that in a way that Russell Wilson doesn't. I'm just concerned that Dart, coming from the offense he came from with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, I just don't think that he's going to be ready in year one. And like you said, this coaching staff might only have 1 year. So I think it makes it like a pretty tricky spot for them to be in.
And Derek, one last one for me before we get out of here. Cam Ward, right? Obviously, number 1 overall pick. I'm curious, is he a franchise changer in your opinion, or is he just a product of the market and he basically got bumped up to number 1 because he's the quarterback? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's like, he's not as good of a prospect as some of the other quarterbacks who have gone number 1. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not some of those other guys. Like, he's not even Caleb Williams. Like, he's not quite that caliber of player. But I think we've seen worse quarterbacks go number 1 overall. I think he's a better prospect than Jared Goff was coming out of college. I think he's a better prospect to me than Kyler was, better than Baker. So I think he's really talented. And this goes back to a little bit what I was talking about with Drake May. I just love the quarterbacks who are willing to be creative and push the envelope. And Cam Ward did that, obviously sometimes to his detriment. But I would much rather have that guy who is also really talented than guys who are a little bit less talented, a little bit more scared. So I don't know if he ever has like top 5, top 6 potential, but I don't think I'll be surprised if 2-3 years from now, we're all talking about him like, oh, is he one of those guys who's in the back half of the top 10, quarterback 9, quarterback 10, something like that. I think he can absolutely be that.
He's Derrik Klassen. You can catch him on the Athletic Football Show. Derek, what's the schedule for that show these days?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit wonky lately because Robert took vacation about a week and a half ago. So we have a bunch of like banked up shows that we've done. Some of them are mailbags, some of them are like lingering question shows and all that stuff. But we've got 4 episodes a week for pretty much the rest of the offseason. That's the plan. And so obviously we have a little bit more time before divisional previews. So we're going to be doing some more of the lingering questions episodes, and then just a bunch of other one-off ideas that we're trying to fill the space with. But a lot of content, that's for sure.
Well, we always appreciate you having on, buddy, and continued success for you.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it, man.